Can you believe we got through all of sales? I am so happy that I'm done because I am going to go sit and watch a show or something. Well, it's kind of late, but you know what? We'll see. You know, I can impress myself sometimes with my ability to fit things into my schedule. Now, I hope this is helpful. I want to just give the disclaimer, like I'm not a professional teacher at this point. Do not teach for law school or a bar prep class or anything like that. Not employed by any university at this particular moment for anything of this nature. I'm simply a student who I understand the material very well, and I'm hoping that the way I taught it made more sense. I know I probably seem to have dumbed it down, but the reality of it is you don't have to speak with legalese to be smart and know what you're talking about and know how to apply the law. You need to understand and internalize the law, and specifically regarding the concept. And so this is how I've come to understand it. It makes sense to me. I hope that it makes sense to you. And I didn't go over every single little nuanced detail. I tried to hit everything I could think of as it came up. So I will just say a couple things first. Remember that some of these rules only apply to merchants. They only apply to transactions between both merchant on a seller side and a buyer side. And generally, there is a lot of broadness to the UCC Article 2. Additionally, whatever is left out of the contract, we will use what's called the gap filler by the UCC to fill in the term, fill in the understanding, fill in what's missing so that we can still have a good contract, because the basic policy for almost everything is freedom of contract, and we want to encourage the economy. Anytime you have something that you're confused about, if you fill in a rule from the UCC and you explain that you did so because of those public policy reasons, you should be fine. And there are some people that like to know that you understand the reason behind something. And also, I find that if you know the reason behind a rule, it makes it a little bit easier to remember and also understand. So, most generally, okay, we have, I said 20 steps, but I realized that I kind of pushed steps together when I went to the videos, which you can separate them out further if you'd like, but this is how I numbered them, okay? Obviously, the very first step is there a contract? Now remember, pay attention, I didn't say is the contract enforceable. I said, is there a contract? And if there is a contract, then you have to determine what's going to govern that contract. Is it going to be the UCC? Is it Article 2 of the UCC that's going to govern? Now remember, the contract has basic offer, acceptance, and consideration. And remember that there is a rule for merchants, and that is going to be the firm offer. I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but just in case I didn't. If you are a non-merchant or a merchant as the buyer, it doesn't matter. What matters is the seller, who's the offeror in this example, if they offer you something for a specific price, a specific item, and they say that you have a specific amount of time to respond, they're not allowed to renege on that deal. They're not allowed to close that offer or take it away until the timeline that was set, or 60 days. Because that is considered reasonable. So if I tell you I will sell you this broken marker, and I'm a merchant of markers, and I say, and I will hold this deal for you for 59 days, I'm legally obligated to hold it 59 days. I can't turn around and sell to somebody else, okay? Now, after we determine if there's a contract, offer, acceptance, consideration, then we go to, are we in the UCC Article 2 universe? Then we see, is this contract a good contract? Not because it's a good contract, but a goods contract or a service-based contract. And that's very important to determine if we are in the UCC Article 2 universe, because the UCC Article 2 only governs goods and services, goods, not services. So really what helps with that is figuring out what the heart of the deal is. Is it for stuff? Is it for someone's expertise or skills or manual labor? Then we look towards what a buyer and seller is in the context of the UCC and their obligations and requirements, which can bleed into other parts of the analysis, and truly understanding what they are supposed to do, whether they are a merchant or not, in their respective positions. And then this is the one that I pushed together. I'm not sure why, but if I wouldn't have pushed together, we would have been at 20. So just so you know. So 5A is statute of frauds. There's a lot of nuance for that, okay? So statute of frauds lets us know that even if we have a contract, is it still enforceable? And I didn't go over unconscionability, but statute of frauds doesn't necessarily think about unconscionability, but you could throw unconscionability into there if you want to determine if it is or is not enforceable. Now, there's two types of unconscionability, procedural and substantive. And they pretty much go towards, if the deal is so unfairly sided towards one side, that's going to be the substantive. That's the substance of the deal is unfair and it's only favoring one party. Or procedural, which is when you're actually signing the contract, you didn't have time to read it, didn't have time to go over it because you're not as sophisticated, you don't understand, or you are under pressure or something like that. So when you're looking at statutory frauds, if you have time to consider unconscionability, you could throw that in there. But we have statutory frauds. Then we have the parole evidence rule, which comes in sometimes, depending on what's going on. Typically, it's bars extrinsic evidence, but for partial integration, sometimes you can use it to help understand or supplement a term, and even add additional terms that are in harmony. And then if you remember, at the end of the day, when it comes to parole evidence, it can even be used for ambiguous or supplemental terms to explain things even in fully integrated contracts. Then obviously we have the battle of the forms, which helps us figure out if we're going to knock out rules or allow them to come in. And then it's going to tell us what rules are going to govern, and there's no mirror image required if it's between merchants. Now, after we've determined that helps us figure out, first of all, what the terms of the contract are and if they're enforceable, okay? Then we're going to go, okay, now that we know that, is this a single transaction contract or an installment contract, okay? Then we have to figure out, are we allowed to imply perfect tender rule, or do we have the ability to cure a problem? Is there a right to cure that we're allowed to do? Now remember, that's kind of based on the sixth step, and based on the circumstances, very nuanced. Some either could apply one or the other, both, it just depends, okay? Then obviously we have inspection and acceptance. The buyer has a right to inspect, and they can accept without inspecting, but if there's a problem later, they can just be held to have had knowledge, or it's kind of on them. And a buyer has to have the reasonable time to inspect, otherwise it would be unfair, and he could eventually reject on the inability to do so. So there is a level of inspection and acceptance that kind of go hand in hand. Then next we have obviously the ability for a buyer to revoke acceptance after he's accepted, or reject acceptance off the bat. Remember, you cannot reject acceptance once you've already accepted. If you want to take back your acceptance of something, it's called a revocation. It's not called a rejection. Rejection is the first time off. Revocation is I take it back, okay? Then obviously we have risk of loss. That's going to be based on FOB, depending on the circumstances. Sometimes the analysis can discuss like damages regarding insurance, and that's where risk of loss is important. If you don't have anything about insurance, you probably could skip it, because if the seller and the buyer's insurance are arguing who's liable, that's why it's important, because whoever's liable, that's the insurance carrier that's going to step in, okay? Then obviously we have breach of contract. What kinds of breaches occur, right? And then obviously we have different types of warranties. We have an express warranty or implied. What are the differences? How are they created? How can they be disclaimed? And the specific types of express and implied warranties. And obviously we have buyer remedies if there is a breach on the seller or something happens with the contract. Then we have seller remedies if the buyer breaches and doesn't perform on the contract. Then obviously you have damages for either the buyer or the seller. Lastly, we went over a little bit of what leases are, and if it's a true lease or a distinguished, I keep saying distinguished, I think I like the word, disguised sale. And I think that is everything I have for you. I would say practice multiple choice just in case, because there is a professor that I actually truly like and find him very knowledgeable, but I also think that he has a tendency to sneak in multiple choice when he can. He thinks it'll help us better test or maybe separate out a curve a little bit. That's my theory, I could be wrong. But I would say practice both just in case, and multiple choice, it's really good to know your damage calculations, because that's going to be a lot faster to test on in that circumstance. And other than that, I think that is it. I wish you the best of luck. I hope this helped. I hope that there is nothing that you are uncertain about, and I hope that you enjoyed learning as much as I enjoyed going over it. And good luck. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day or week or month or whatever it is, and good luck with the exam or the bar or whatever you're doing. And I'll pray that you do well. All right, bye.